Hi, everybody, and welcome to this week's Writers Chat. This is where we like to gather together as writers, talk about writing, all things writers, for writers, and by writers is what we like to say. And so we are so glad to see everybody here. We got a whole crew in our chat room here. And if you're taking the time to watch the replay, thank you. Thank you for taking time to feed your skills as a writer and to grow, because that's what we're here to as a community, to help each other grow and learn. I am here with my co-hosts, Johnny and Melissa and Brandy today, and we've got a special guest and a great topic today to share with everybody. So I'm going to turn it over to Melissa and have her introduce our topic and our special guest.
Good morning, everybody, and we're really excited to have a special guest returning with us, Zena Dell Lowe. She's been here several times before and always just totally a wealth of information when it comes to story, and we enjoy having her back. And for those of you who don't know, Zena Dell Lowe is an award-winning writer, speaker, teacher, story coach, and podcast host. Zena has worked professionally in the entertainment industry for over 20 years as a writer, producer, director, actress, and story consultant. Zena also teaches advanced classes on writing all over the country. In addition to her work as a filmmaker, Zena launched the Storyteller's Mission with Zena Dell Lowe, a podcast designed to serve the whole artist, not just focus on craft. In 2021, Zena launched the Storyteller's Mission online platform, where she offers advanced classes and other key services to writers. Zena loves story and loves to support storytellers. Her passion is to equip artists of all levels to achieve excellence at their craft so that they will truly have everything they need to change the world for the better through story. And to find out more about Zena and her current courses and projects, you can check out her website at www.thestorytellersmission.com. Thank you for coming back and talking with us today, Zena. We're anxious to hear about how to make our stories commercial.
Wonderful. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I always love talking to this group. It's a great group because you guys are serious about writing, and you're practical too. You know, there's a lot of Christian groups that I talk to that it can start getting a little spiritualized. And what I like about this group is that you're real, you're authentic, and you're actually looking for the practical, hands-on meat of how to actually do the craft and not just spiritualizing the whole endeavor, which I really appreciate. So thank you for having me back. This is such a great topic. When I was asked to speak on how to make your story idea commercial, it's such a great topic. And partly because Christians can be bad about this. There's an attitude I've often run into where there's sort of this feeling of, well, if God, it's all in God's hands, he'll do with it what he's going to do with it. And what happens is it tends to make us lazy. I think sometimes we tend to throw it up to providence and think that we're doing our due diligence, that we're just being obedient and writing something. But I think if we do that, we are checking our brains at the door. And God has called us to use our brains and not just be lazy in that regard. So I do think that we need to test our story ideas for whether or not they have the potential of commercial success. Now, here's the other thing. I think Christians can kind of be snobby about this because there's maybe an attitude of, if it's too commercial, I've sold out. I'm not having my message be as strong as I want it to be. I mean, there's sort of a built-in assumption that if it's really Christian, what I'm writing, or if it possesses a Christian worldview, then Hollywood or the rest of the world is going to reject it. And therefore, if they accept it, I must have sold out. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that that is true. In fact, I would like to argue that it's the opposite. If your story is actually good enough, then it will be accepted, even if it has spiritual themes. Hollywood actually loves spiritual themes. They're not sitting around with this mastermind of how can we squelch all things spiritual. They actually aren't doing that. There's not this big conspiracy to stifle Christian writers or projects that have a Christian worldview. It's just that those sorts of projects aren't very good typically. And so they are rejecting bad story, but they're not really rejecting anything that has spiritual themes or the like. So I think it's a false assumption. If your story is good enough, you won't have to rely on the God card, because the God card will be so ingrained, so built into the story, that it will actually make that story come alive. And of course, I can give examples of this, of stories that have done this, where it's the spiritual part of it is so ingrained in it that we don't question. We know there would be no story without that spiritual element. And that spiritual element is what makes the story come alive and people accept it. Look at Les Mis, for example. Les Mis is a story that has been it's been made into several movies. It's a Broadway hit. Of course, it's a book that's been around forever. I mean, not forever, but you know what I'm saying. And people love it. It's very, very much a story of a man who is saved by God and how his life is transformed. But it's such a beautiful story that that's not stopping Hollywood from continuing to make it into, I mean, the most recent one was with Hugh Jackman, and it was phenomenal. So I think that that's just a misnomer. It's just a mistake. It's a mind shift we've got to get around. We have to get over our hoity-toityness, I guess, and realize that we need good stories. And here's the final point on that, is that we actually, if we want to make an impact on culture, we have to start writing more commercial stories. We have been stuck, I think, for too long we're being subcategorized. We're basically preaching to the choir. Our stuff is only being read by other Christians. I hate the term Christian movie. I mean, I just hate it. I don't think movies, well, I know movies aren't Christian. People are Christian. But there's a whole category of movies now that are called Christian films, which I strongly object to, but there's a market for it. But guess who that market is? Other Christians. And I'm sorry, I don't think that's what we want. I think we want our stories to be so universal that they resonate with everybody, and we want everybody to read them. I don't want my stuff to just be for other Christians. So to do that, we need to know that our story has universal appeal, that it's actually appealing to multiple people, not just other Christians. To that end, I want to talk to you today about how do you do that. Now, here's what's interesting. So yesterday, I spent 3 hours giving a critique for two gentlemen who'd hired me to do a script critique on a film that they're planning to go into production on as soon as possible. But they had some story problems, and so they asked me to critique the script. And it was a 3-hour critique. And I approached it from three angles: the main character, the overall structure of the story, and then the mythology, because it's a sci-fi, and so the mythology of the world itself and the creature and all the fantasy sci-fi elements. And I'm basically recommending kind of a page 1 rewrite, which is probably not what they wanted to hear. But the gentleman asked me, he said, okay, so what I really need to know is, do you think there's enough here to even warrant this work? Like, do you feel that this story even has merit? And it was a really good question, because in a lot of ways, what he had was a lot of cliches that needed to be reworked and needed to be new. You know, he had the typical alcoholic sheriff who's estranged from his wife and kid, and you know, we've seen that 1,000 times. So the question becomes, well, what makes a story have merit? What makes it actually worth all that work to put into it, to go back to page 1 when he's already done several drafts? And is it worth it? Is it worth it? All that work, all that effort. And I told him, I said, well, yeah, of course it's worth it. Because who the story is happening to, that's what we care about. There's nothing new under the sun. There's nothing new. Every story has conceivably been told. There are, you know, basically, maybe 6 major types of story in the world that are just the archetypes of story. That they've all been told. It's who it's happening to that really matters. And if we, the audience, if we create a main character that is real to us, that is, and then is likable or sympathetic or very, very intriguing to us, the audience, then all of a sudden, yeah, you have a story with commercial appeal, because that's really the foundation. It starts with character. It starts with character. So you have to, first and foremost, the only reason to tell a story at all is if you have a compelling main character at the center that the audience wants to emotionally invest in. If your audience doesn't want to emotionally invest in your character, then you will not be commercially successful. That is the acid test of all of it. So it doesn't matter what genre you're writing. It doesn't matter if it even feels familiar. It doesn't matter how spiritual the themes are. It doesn't matter if you have a compelling main character. But I would argue that what makes for a compelling main character is typically when we're not preaching in the story, or when we're not trying to beat people over the head with a message, because that's not character. It starts with character. So that's the very first thing that I want to say today, is that you must, to make a commercial story, you have to understand that it starts with your main character, which means the most important thing you can learn as a storyteller is how to create a character that makes the audience fall in love with them. By the way, even if you're creating a villainous character that is your main character, there's 3 types of main characters. There's either the anti-hero, the hero, or the villain. That's it. Those are the 3 types of main characters, in my humble opinion. It doesn't matter even if you have a villain who is your main character. If the audience is so intrigued and captivated with them, they will still be invested in their journey, such as Hannibal Lecter. You know, Hannibal Lecter, we're invested in him, and he is a big old sicko. But he's so fascinating to us, and he's so interesting. So you still have to find a way to make your character compelling to your audience. That is where all of it starts and ends, is with the compelling main character. Having said that, there are some other factors that we can look at. And so we're going to talk about that. So one of the things that tends to happen when we're thinking about writing a story is we often start, especially as Christians, because we want our stories to matter. Seldom, in my experience, and maybe you're an exception, and I kind of hope you are, but seldom in my experience do Christians approach a story first through character. Typically, yes, you can hear my dog snoring. I'm so sorry. She's snoring next to me. But typically in story, do we approach it from the character first, meaning that we get an idea of a great character and then figure out where the story goes from there. Most of the time, we approach story through theme or message. We have something we want to say, and then we come up with a character that we think is going to best exemplify that. And by the way, there's no right or wrong way. It's not wrong to do that. It's problematic. It's potentially problematic because it's easier to then become message driven and to create a cookie cutter character who isn't completely three-dimensional or compelling to us. And so it can be dangerous, but it's not wrong. And I have certainly done it. When I wrote my film Hardshell, for example, I started with a theme. I wanted to explore the idea of what has to happen for two people who absolutely adore each other to end up completely cutting each other out of their lives. And I decided that it should be a story about sisters, because to me, sisters, that should be just this special type of relationship. And to cut a sister out of your life has to be like cutting off an arm, because you're so part of each other. And so I wanted to explore that. And that's what I started with. And then a story emerged from there. So it's not wrong to do that. But it is potentially problematic. Nevertheless, when we start with a theme or a message, what we have to take the time to do then is really then flesh out a story and be willing to let that story, because of the character and the choices that they're making, we have to let go of our preconceived message that we want the audience to get and really explore it. It should be a discovery for us as to what we're actually saying based on the character and the choices that they're making. If we already know everything, now the character just becomes a puppet, and we don't want that. We want a character that is determining the plot because of the choices they're making, and we are discovering it too. I really think that's the difference between writing an agenda and writing a theme, is that when we write an agenda, we already have a preconceived idea of what we're going to say, and by God, nothing is going to allow us to say anything else, even if the evidence of what we're writing wants to take us a different direction. We'll just ignore that and take it where we already have it going. Whereas a theme is something we're exploring and we're open to. We're really open to where is this going to go, because we don't always know the answers. So it's more approaching the material from a place of inquisitiveness rather than dogmatic determinism. In a commercial story, there's always a theme. And I would like to submit to you that your theme is an argument. Your theme is basically an argument that the rest of the story supports. So that by the time we get there, it is a theme. It's, hey, here's what happens to a person who makes these sorts of life choices. If you make this choice, you will end up in death. Or if you make these choices, you will end up, it will give you life or whatever. I mean, I'm making this up, but there's an argument that the rest of your story is supporting. So it's okay to have a theme that you're going for. But here's what happens in Christendom. We get so caught up in theme that we ignore some of the other nuances of story that actually make it interesting for the audience. A lot of times what happens in Christendom is we're so word-oriented, we're so idea-oriented. And by the way, I love words and I love ideas, and I talk too much and I think about them too much. But we forget that story is about imagination. Story is about creating a world where the other people imagine it in their head. And when you have a lot of scenes with two characters sitting around a table drinking tea and talking, or somebody on the front porch thinking about their life and thinking about their mother, and they're rocking back and forth, you have abandoned all the potential possibility of story that makes it commercial. A commercial story creates a world that is imaginative, that comes alive in the mind of the reader or the mind of the viewer, even if we're watching a movie. So we want to make sure that when we have a theme that we're approaching a story through, that then we can explore that theme in a way that excites the imagination. What do I mean by that? Okay, well, for example, let's look at the story Finding Nemo. Basically, Finding Nemo is a story about a father learning to, he's coming of age. It's the father's coming of age story. He's a worry-wart. He's a hovering father worrying about his son. And of course, his worst nightmare comes true, and then he has to go and rescue his son. But in that process, he learns a lot about himself and about his son. And he learns to appreciate a new character and Dory, and to reach out to the people. He gets out of his own shell and his own comfort zone. It's a wonderful story. But I'm here to tell you, having that story be told through fish was brilliant, because now it brought to life an imaginative world that we never would have been able to explore if we'd kept it with people. If this had been a story about people, it just wouldn't have been nearly as interesting or as exciting or fun or any of those things. So but it's the same theme. It's the same theme. Now, I'm not saying that you look at your current story and you go, oh, well, let me just maybe that should be through, I was going to say pecans, not pecans, like pecans. What are they called? Those birds. I don't know why I thought of pecans.
Pecans.
Thank you. So not pecans, or maybe they're nutty. I don't know. I'm not saying that you automatically just change your story to make it about animals, but you want to look for an arena that's interesting. An arena is the space in which your story takes place. So you've got theme, but then you've got arena. And the arena has to be interesting. And let me give you a hint here. We are especially interested in worlds we haven't seen. And I'm not talking about Zeldron in the planet of, in the whatever, the nebulon of blah, blah, blah. Like, that's just esoteric language that's crazy. When I say world, I mean the world of your story. The fish market down the street all of a sudden becomes an arena. Who here, has anybody seen the new movie Coda, with the girl that was, she's the only hearing girl in a family of deaf people. So she's got 2 deaf parents and a deaf brother, but she can hear. So she, grows up speaking sign language and all that. And it's a really interesting movie. And but in addition to having it be, that's part of the world and everything. But in addition to that, what do these people do for a living? I mean, where does she live? Like, what is the arena? And it is a small fishing town, and her parents are fishermen. And so we get to explore that element and the problems with that. If you're not hearing and you're on the water and you don't have a hearing person, and then, they're trying to be boarded by the water police. It's 8 a.m. here. I can't think of the words, but you know what I'm saying. And they can't hear them and all those problematic things. So that's an arena that's really, really great. Yes, the Coast Guard, thank you. The water police. That's a special arena that made that film interesting. So you want to try to find an arena for your story that is interesting and new to the audience. Maybe you want to tell a story about, thematically, showing how man is capable of overcoming the most horrendous possible circumstances because of hope, even in Christ. Let's just say you want to even say hope in Christ helps you overcome the most horrendous human conditions. Okay, well, maybe then you'll choose an arena like a World War II camp, maybe the only female World War II work camp that we know about, or something like that. And it's a female character in this World War II camp. That's an arena we don't know anything about. So you're exploring this wonderful theme, but you put it in an arena that is new and interesting and compelling to the audience, something we want to know something about, and something we haven't seen. That's where that cliche thing becomes a problem. You okay? My dog's choking over here. The cliche thing becomes a problem because we've seen it and it's not interesting and compelling to us. So if you're going to have a cliche type situation, like a small time alcoholic sheriff or a small town alcoholic sheriff estranged from his wife and kids, then you have to spend a lot of time showing me how that guy is unique from other small town alcoholic sheriffs who are estranged from his wife and kids, or else I'm automatically like, well, I've seen that. See, we don't want to read the stuff that we've already seen, even though we've seen everything or we read everything. I got my dad a Kindle for Christmas. He didn't want it. Oh, I like real books, right? We've all done that. I like real books too, but the Kindle is so dang convenient. And so I got him one for Christmas. He buys a new book every week on my account, mind you. Every single week there's a new book purchased, and they're all the same. It's like Jack Reacher. I mean, I think he's read every single Lee Child, and when he's done with those, he goes to, Jack Ryan, and then when he's done with these are the books he likes. And I was saying to a friend of mine, like, it can't be much different. Like, this is like his 13th Jack Reacher novel. Like, it can't, but Jack Reacher is such an interesting, unique character himself that apparently he's enough different from Jack Ryan, and he's enough different from, these other characters, Jack Bauer. I mean, they're all named Jack even. My goodness. I think they're all named Jack. But the point is, even they're all the same, and yet they're so uniquely different that it still compels them to keep buying more of the same books. So again, there are a lot of Jacks out there. Maybe don't name your thriller character, your main character, Jack. Maybe avoid that. Okay, so arena is really important. Compelling main character is really important, but now we get into the real nitty-gritty of commerciality, some of the things that Hollywood looks for. So here's the truth. There is nothing wrong, and in fact, we should want this. We should want, if we have a good enough story that we see as a movie in our brains as we're writing it, why not have Hollywood come along and option that? Right now, I think I can tell you this. Yeah, I can tell you this. I am currently, I've been hired by the studio to adapt one of Eva Marie Everson's novels into a screenplay. So I'm currently adapting Five Brides into a feature film. So that's pretty exciting. Eva is going to have a film based on her novel, and I get to adapt it. How cool is that? I mean, it's amazing. We should want that because it opens up the potential of our audience. And if we're telling good stories, then we want the world to see those stories. But in order for that to happen, there are certain things that Hollywood looks for. So these are some of the specific things that Hollywood looks for when they're looking for material to adapt into a screenplay. The first two are, is there a great main character? And is there a great arena that we haven't seen before? Something compelling, something interesting, and a good theme. I mean, those, I guess, three things. Okay, so those are things that every good story should have. Those are the foundational things for whether or not it has the potential to be commercial. It doesn't matter if it's a vampire movie, if it's interesting and unique and fresh, then it doesn't matter because there's nothing new under the sun. And what makes it, that's my dog. She agrees with me. What makes it fresh is, again, the main character that you're working from. But in addition to that, here's something that Hollywood often looks for. They look for something, they call it a tentpole movie. And what that means is that it's a story that tends to sell because it already has other things supporting it, tent poles. So it's already got other things supporting it. Now, of course, one thing that you should know is that Hollywood is terrified. It is so expensive to make a movie. I mean, Eva Marie's novel is a period piece, and I'm having to write it with considerable budget constraints. You know, I know what the budget is that they're supposed to make this movie for. It's nearly impossible to do a period piece for what they think that they're going to do it for. I don't know how they're going to do it, but I'm trying to accommodate that in the writing. I'm trying to make sure that I'm not making it too expensive and astronomical. I'm trying to write to the budget. It's so expensive to make a movie. It's risky. It's way riskier to make a movie than it is to write a book. See, in a book, I can have all sorts of explosions, but in a movie, I have to then pay for those explosions. We have to see them. So Hollywood is concerned about money, which means they also want to know that there's a built-in audience. They want to know. That's why Hollywood wants a specific genre, by the way. You have to know your genre, and you have to write for that genre and milk it for everything it's worth. You can't have something that is, well, it's sort of a romance, thriller, buddy movie. No, they don't know how to market that, see? They need to market to an audience so they can get those people to come and buy the ticket so that they can make the money back. You got to think in terms of how are they going to make their money back? And they only are able to make their money back by having an audience in mind. And that means you have to have a specific genre. So they're looking for, if you are and believe me, if you're writing Jack Reacher novels, then you have a built-in audience. They already know people are going to come and see those movies because the books have sold millions of copies. Harry Potter, even though it was incredibly expensive, it was a worldwide phenomenon. Pretty easy to make that decision to make it into a film because they know they're going to make their money back if they do it well. Most of us are not in that category, which means they're going to be looking for other things besides that you already have a built-in audience. But you already know, you've already struggled with this part, right? Because publishers don't even want to publish you unless you have a platform, unless you can sell your own books. I mean, it's terrible. I mean, writers spend more time trying to sell their own books these days than actually just writing. And I hate the way the industry is set up right now. It's really, really hard for writers to just create good artistic work. We have to become our own marketers and all these things. Nevertheless, the point is they want people that have an audience, but it's okay if you don't. If you have some of these other things, a tentpole story, something that sells because it's got something already supporting it. For example, they love true stories. Now, not memoirs necessarily, unless it's a very, very compelling memoir. But memoirs are actually really hard to sell, and they don't typically do very well in Hollywood. I just watched one the other day. What was it called? Oh, The Tender Bar. It was nominated for some SAG awards. It's Ben Affleck's in it, and it's a memoir. And it was okay. But they tend to be a little self-indulgent and sappy, and the memories. But so I'm not talking about memoirs. I'm talking about those true stories. True stories. Look at what Hollywood puts out. I mean, if it's a true story, you have a real chance. If it's a true story based on a historical event that we could be interested in, and that actually, we should know about, then they are interested, because there's a huge audience for that. I love true stories. Dunkirk was fascinating because that was a true story of a historical event that I had heard about, but having it put into a movie form was just fascinating, right? Blindside is a great example. That's based on a true story. So if you know or have the possibility of writing a true story like that, that's a really it has to be a compelling story. It can't be just any true story. And it can't be a true story, say, about your grandma and grandpa either. I'm talking about a historical event that happened that matters to more than just your family. You see what I'm saying? You can tell the true story of your grandma and grandpa, but it doesn't really matter. Now, there are exceptions to that. One of the things that about Eva's story, Five Brides, is that it's based on a true story about 5 women in post-World War II America who end up purchasing a wedding dress all together. They go in together to buy this wedding dress, and then, they all get to wear it, I guess. But the point is, it's a true story, which makes it more interesting than if it was just this made up story about these 5 women doing it. It wouldn't be nearly as interesting. But the fact that it is a true story, suddenly it adds an interest factor. And then, of course, you still have to make the story compelling. So true stories are huge. There are certain genres that make your story more commercial. Most of the time, and I'm not sure if you're aware of this trend, but there are fewer and fewer straight dramas that are either being made in Hollywood, but also books that are being published in that regard that are just straight dramas. And the reason for that, I'm convinced, is because television is covering that category. With all the streaming that's happening, television is the place to go for drama now. That's where we go. So consequently, and they're not, they're not big, if you will. Like, now to actually go to the theater to watch a movie, people have such great setups at home now with their home studios that they're going to watch a drama at home in their living room. They're not going to go to the theater to watch it. So those 2 trends, I think, make it so that Hollywood isn't really making or adapting novels into screenplays, though they are doing like limited series, right, for television. So that might be a route to go. But in terms of genres that tend to be selected for films, thrillers, actions, and comedies are your 3 biggest. Thrillers being the highest on that. And a lot of times it's an action thriller, right? An action thriller, because that's what we like. We like the suspense. They're more compelling, and really thrillers are less expensive to make than an adventure or an action. I mean, adventure movies, believe it or not, are pretty expensive usually. Unless you're, if it's a children's adventure like Goonies or something, it might be more cost effective. But those are typically your 3 genres. So if you can write any of those things, now here's the thing. My very favorite genre is fantasy. I don't know if anybody here ever has read any of the Dresden Files. I love it. I've actually read, I think I've read them twice. I'll probably read them again because I think they're so really, really well done his world, his mythology, it all adds up, and he does a really good job of, there are like 18 books in the series, and I don't even think he's done. So it's just an incredible arc what he's managed to do. But they tried to make it. Fantasy is super hard to take, actually, and put them into a movie. Now, they did it really well with Harry Potter, but it's actually super hard to do because A, it's super expensive, and B, it's it can be cheesy. It can be really cheesy if it's not done well. Look at Dune, right? Like they just redid Dune. The new Dune is phenomenal. But they had to they couldn't do the one movie Dune in the book Dune in one movie. They have to break it up into and so they didn't even know if they were going to be able to if they were going to be successul enough to make another one, in which case they would have just made this really expensive first one that ends and it's like, what happens next? Like, it's such a risk. But fantasy is hard. They tried to make the Dresden Files into a TV series, and it got canceled after a few episodes because it just didn't work. It was hard to capture. So even though that's my favorite, look at Chronicles of Narnia. I mean, I actually think they did a pretty good job with them, but they just couldn't get them to work enough to keep making them. It's really too bad. But it was hard for them. Like, I think a lot of people that wanted them to be good didn't feel connected to the material the way that they did the book. Of course, how do you beat the book? But nevertheless, they just couldn't do it. They couldn't do what they did with Harry Potter. So fantasy is really hard to capture and to translate into and now it can be done, and we've seen lots of examples of it being done, but it's just not as easy. Sci-fi is a little easier. There's a lot of great sci-fi. Hollywood loves sci-fi, but in order for it to be truly compelling or to be considered, it kind of has to fall into one of these other categories, like a sci-fi thriller or a sci-fi action, sci-fi adventure, something like that. It has to have that attached to it. Or a sci-fi comedy, like what is it? Never Give Up, Never Surrender.
Galaxy Quest.
Galaxy Quest. Yes, one of my all-time favorite movies. So, you can have a comedy sci-fi too, but it's got to be one of those to really be compelling. So genre is really important, is the point. Now, on top of that, you want to be thinking about the young adult market. So and that's not always true, but this is more Hollywood related. This isn't necessarily how to make your book commercial. You should know your audience for your book. I'm finding, for example, on my podcast, I mean, we look for audiences on podcasts too. My demographic is kind of like 35 to 55. Now, there's people on either side of that, but that's kind of the people that are like listening to my podcast, which also is a little discouraging, because that means that the young people aren't listening, like the true young people aren't listening. And of course, that's the primary demographic that you want to try to reach with a lot of these stories, would be like 16 to 35. And the reason for that is several. One is because they're remarkably undiscriminating in their tastes. They will, if they like it, they'll go. I mean, if it's a good date movie, they'll go. A good date movie is always commercial. A good date movie is always commercial. But they're a lot more sophisticated than we were. They have been exposed to so many things. So if they're into something, they are into it. But it takes a lot to capture their attention. But once they're captured, they are invested. And then guess what? They'll buy the video game. They'll watch the TV spinoff. They'll buy the books that are written by the minor character that is just who writes little short stories on the side. You have transmedia potential, and they'll watch the YouTube videos or the web series based on these other minor characters or based on the musical act that they brought in. They'll look at everything that's related to the germ of that story, right? They'll look at all of these other ends. So it's a built-in market that has the potential to expand. And that's really where I want to take us here, as we've talked about. And this is sort of a new thing, really, that's happening. It's a new trend that you need to be thinking about. And it's outside of our traditional thinking. Things aren't like they used to be, either in traditional publishing or in Hollywood. Right now, to be commercial, your story has to have transmedia potential. So what does that mean? What does transmedia mean? Transmedia, and this is not going to be the end all be all definition, but I'm just going to give you a common sense or a practical way to wrap your brain around this. It's not, here's what it's not. Let's start with what it's not. It used to be, we would think about story in terms of how, oh, well, we could also do it as a musical, or, oh, we can take the same story and now let's do a TV version of it, or now let's do a short, whatever. But it's the same story, basically. That's not what it is. That's not what transmedia is. Transmedia, think of it like branches from a wheel. If the center of the wheel is your story, your original story with these particular characters, the spokes are the spin-offs from it, sort of. The other things that come alive, not the same story though, but like continuing the story in a different way, or going into a different part of the story. But it's a world, it's a universe that you're creating that has the potential to come alive in a bunch of different mediums. You can make a video game. You can make, there can be a bunch of those, where all the short stories are published? What's that thing called? I can't remember what it's called. Prime Pam, I'm not familiar with, but it's like where all the, you read like these 3 to 5 little page short stories, and you can publish them on there or whatever. And there's a bunch of those. You can have a YouTube spin-off thing. You can have a web series. You can then have a whole, of course, a feature film, but now you can have also a subset of characters who go on to have a TV series that are based on, but it all takes place in the same world. It's the potential for that world to create all these other media things that all connect, and yet they're separate and they're their own thing. Star Wars is a great example. Marvel is a great example. Even Harry Potter is a great example. I think she's done a musical now. But actually she hasn't done nearly as much. I mean, the Harry Potter hasn't done nearly as much as like Star Wars. Star Wars has all the TV stuff, but it also has all these books, like that other people write as part of the canon. They have to fit into the canon. Of course, comic books are part of it. Like you can have a graphic novel based on these 3 characters. And see, what happens is, the reason this is so powerful, yes, Star Trek, that's exactly right. These are huge, huge things. It's huge, but everybody needs to be thinking this way now. See, the problem is it used to just be these big conglomerations that were able to do that, but now they're looking for that for anything. When you create a story idea, you need to be thinking about the universe that you're creating and whether or not it has the potential for any of those other things. Now, it doesn't have to have the potential for all of those things. Maybe you're never going to have a video game in the story that you're telling, but maybe there could be a graphic novel spinoff, or maybe there could be this or this or this. You want to maximize the potential of these other types of media for the universe that you're creating. It just is how it has to be these days, because that is, unfortunately, the future of the industry, because it's so expensive, see, that's what it really comes down to. It comes back to this idea of risk. It comes back to this idea of money. And so you can't, it used to be that you could have a one-off movie. You could write a hit movie and be done. You can't do that. They're not doing it anymore. They're not buying spec scripts anymore for standalone films. They're just not going to do it. It better have the potential to be a series. It better have the potential to have spin-offs, because it won't get picked up otherwise. It's changing, and it's because it is so expensive these days. Part of it is because there's just so much. There's a saturated market, so that means it takes so much money to even find your audience, that they want to make sure that they can keep the audience. And here's what they know. They know that if they find an audience for any one of those things, this is why you have Witcher as a TV series now. Witcher is a video game, but now they have the TV series, and it's phenomenal, by the way. I've never played the video game, but I think the TV series is phenomenal, and it's actually quite moral. Interestingly, I love The Witcher says, you know, they're always trying to get him to kill monsters. And they're saying to him, well, it's the lesser of two evils. And he says, lesser, greater, it's all evil. Evil is evil. And I love that. I mean, it's just an absolute view of truth, right? It's not a compromised view. So all this to say, if you want your story idea to be commercial, you have to be thinking, unfortunately, about the universe that you're creating and the potential for it to expand into these other types of media. You have to be thinking about transmedia. And if you are interested in learning way more about this than I'm able to explain in this very, very short session, there's a great book by a gentleman named Houston Howard, who says, you're going to need a bigger story. That's the name of the book. You're going to need a bigger story. And Houston is actually joining me at Mission Ranch Films. We're creating a story universe for a bunch of the films that we have in development at Mission Ranch Films that have all these spin-off potentials, and we're building that into the concept. So even as we take these out to to financiers to raise the money, we can already say, well, we also have this graphic novel, and here's the basic story idea, and we also have this, and we also have this. So I love that Houston liked my ideas well enough to come on board, and he's going to help me develop that, because he's the expert right now on this subject. He's the foremost expert on it. So I'm really, really blessed and lucky. He's also a Christian, so that's really, really good news. Anyway, his book, it's really dense, and he will help you to see all of these ways, all these things that can be built into your story to make it, to have all this potential, which you have to have these days if you really want. You have to be your own franchise. You have to have a story that has the potential to have its own franchise, which is a tough, tough thing. It's a tough thing. Now, let me end on this though. Having said all that, that can be daunting. And if you sit down and try to come up with an idea that has the potential to be on the level of Marvel, you'll never write a damn thing. And I can say that. I'm saying that word strongly. You'll never write anything, because it will be so paralyzing and it will be so daunting. So I say all this to you to give you an idea of what to aim for, maybe it excites your imagination, maybe it expands the possibilities, maybe it will, just inspire you to think outside of your own box. What I don't want it to do is squelch you. What I don't want it to do is squelch you. So my encouragement to you is always, always, always defer to what you are passionate about saying. The story that ignites your imagination, the story that you can't get out of your head, because I promise you, if it haunts you, there's something magical there. If it burns in you, if it excites you, if when you think about it, you get emotional, and both in terms of like, like one time I was driving down the freeway and I figured out I had a breakthrough on my novel idea that I've been, trying to solve for a number of years. I'm embarrassed to say that. I'm a lot better at screenplays. But I started crying because it was so beautiful. I was like, oh, thank you, Lord. That's such a beautiful ending. I made myself cry from this idea, or God made me cry, whatever. But the point is, I love it. I love it. Even if they told me, oh, there's never going to be a market for this, I would still have to write this because I love it so much, my story. I just love it. So all of the stuff I'm saying should always, in my humble opinion, now that's not checking your brain at the door. That's not being lazy. That's actually being in tune with where that passion comes from. That's actually working in conjunction with the passion that God gave you, to know that this idea is something that just, I have to tell it. I have to. I love it. I'm passionate. So all of everything that I've said should always take a back seat to the passion that ignites your imagination. That's where it all starts. And I promise you, if it ignites your imagination that much, there's probably potential there that you don't yet see. So maybe it will be that this little part of the talk starts opening up the possibilities of, I never thought about this, but this story that I just love so much, maybe it could be this, or maybe it could be this too, or whatever. And it expands the possibility of something that already ignites your imagination. But that's where it starts. So, all right, I will open it up to questions. Does anybody have any questions about any of this or about anything I've said? Yes.
I love your enthusiasm, and I love the hope that you've given us too. A lot of hope. Johnny, Brandy, Melissa, questions? There are two fiction writers, or all three fiction writers might have something here.
Well, Leslie brought up a good one. You were talking about everything having to have a serious potential. She made the mention of The Lost City, the comedy, the rom-com that just came out with Sandra Bullock, and where we see there is still potential for some standalones. But would you say that's more genre specific? Like some genres are maybe still more prone to that than others, where others there's just no way. They've still got to have that series potential.
I'm not familiar with Lost City. So it's a romantic comedy movie with Sandra Bullock.
Is it Channing? What's his name? Channing.
Channing Tatum.
Channing. Okay. So okay. Here's the weird thing is, Sandra Bullock is her own franchise.
Yeah, she is.
So probably the only chance that film had was to get with someone like Sandra Bullock, because there are people that'll just watch every Sandra Bullock movie that comes out. Yeah, she's great. And by the way, she's getting a little old for a rom-com.
Yeah.
Right? She's 50 something. Like, she ain't no spring chicken. She's a hen. But we're still watching her in these because she's just charming and adorable. So I'm not familiar with the movie, but I can tell you right there that the selling point for that was probably because she wanted to do it, and she is her own franchise. So what else?
Well, I'm just a little overwhelmed, but loving everything. I took like 2 pages of notes and just so sad, and especially just the new information. I mean, like this whole franchise thing, and the considering about the budget when you're writing the screenplay and all of that. I feel like I'm a little bit plugged into the writing community, but you've brought us some really fresh information, and so thank you for that. We really appreciate that, and I really appreciate too the way you wrapped it up, because I was kind of like, oh my gosh, there's nothing I'm writing that would fit this. But, I'm writing the books God gave me to write.
We
Money.
did have one other question.
Sure.
Somebody asked, if you create the universe story, are you the one who writes the spin-off stories too?
Well, that's what's wonderful about if you create a universe, technically speaking, then people start coming to you to pitch ideas for things that could happen in that universe.
Cool.
So this is what happened, Star Wars early on, this started happening. I remember years ago, gosh, I have still one of them. I can't even find them anymore, but they're these Star Wars stories that were written outside of the canon. They supposedly took place between, I think between Empire Strikes Back and then Revenge of the Jedi. And they're wonderful. In fact, I always wondered why they didn't get made into movies. Well, they weren't written. The person that wrote them had to get permission to write them, and they had to not do anything that violated anything else in the universe. He couldn't change anything in the universe that was going to affect canon. But he made his stories work within that, and they were just like these other stories. They were so good. But that guy pitched to write that. And that's what happens. This is, fan fiction, for example. This is what happens with a lot of the fan fiction. But it's more than that. This guy wasn't just a fan. He was an excellent writer. I mean, this wasn't just fan fiction. So, no, you don't have to write all the other stuff. The hope is that people will come and start pitching ideas for that universe because it excites their imagination.
Wow.
The universe that I'm building, and by the way, what's interesting about this is that I was already working on this before I kind of learned. I thought I was kind of crazy. I thought, what am I doing? This is insane. What am I doing? And then I heard Houston Howard speak. And I was like, that's what I'm doing. I need to talk to that guy. And so that's how I ended up having a meeting with him, because I'm like, okay, I'm already doing this, but let me tell you these 3 different stories. They're all standalone stories, but they all take place in this universe. And then we find out they're actually really connected. And it's sort of like M. Night Shyamalan, who did it was Unbreakable. And then years later, like 12 years later, he did Split,
Yeah.
and then Mr. Glass. And that blew me away, because I never saw Unbreakable, but I saw Split. And when I saw Split, I was like, wow, that was amazing. And then I heard that it took place in the same universe as Unbreakable. So guess what I did? I went and I rented Unbreakable. And then Mr. Glass came out. So guess who went to see Mr. Glass? And before I went to see Mr. Glass, guess what I did? I rented Unbreakable again. I rented Split again. And then I went. So he made so much money off of me simply because he had all these stories in the same universe that seemed like they were standalone stories, and yet they were all eventually connected. That's what this has the potential to do. See, it's a shelf life for your story.
Mhm.
By the time I saw Unbreakable, it was 12 years old. It was old. No, you don't typically go back and, I wasn't that interested in it when it first came out. I passed it up. But when I knew it was connected to these other things, I went and got it. I watched it twice, way after. I mean, it renewed its shelf life. So that's the potential here, right? It makes it fascinating. And I was going to say something else. Oh, so in my universe that I'm developing, it's a thriller universe where the basic idea is that Yellowstone National Park is a hub of paranormal activity for, satanic, kind of occultic, paranormal, nebulous, blah, blah, blah activity. And so within that, there's all this weird stuff that happens. Okay, so now I have a Sasquatch story in development, because, there is a theory that Sasquatch could be, spiritual beings that can appear or not, or maybe they're mystical, or, we don't know exactly. So I have a Sasquatch, and it's really just a kid's movie, but it's with a Sasquatch. And so it takes place in this universe. And then I have, another film that's called The Spider Sisters, and it's about this new breed of spiders that this one scientist sister has discovered, and it's a puppet spider who will who's wiping out these frogs because it will kill the females, but then it will puppet the female. It will get into the female and it will call to the males, and then the males will mate with it. And then, or maybe it's the other way around. It kills the males, calls to the females, mate with it, but then plants its seeds in the females. But then the spiders will burst from the inside of the female and will eat it. And so this whole breed of frogs is being destroyed, right? Like it's a horror film, of course. but it takes place in this universe, and the idea is that this frog species is being wiped out, and that's how they discover this. And it takes place in this universe because it's a paranormal activity. That where are these frogs coming from? And it turns out that or not frogs, the spiders, and it's from this paranormal activity. So all this to say, I've also then had a couple of people already say, I'm working on something that takes place in Yellowstone National Park. Can I pitch that to you? And so like all these other people are coming out of the woodwork where it's like they're kind of working on that. And if they could tie their story into the universe that I'm creating, then that would be amazing. And then it would be more for the franchise. So all that to say, it's a fun thing actually, because each of my stories were kind of on their own. I was already trying to do this Sasquatch story, but it was going to be a standalone movie, and it can't be, not today. It has to be in a universe that has the potential for more stuff to happen. But when I started developing this universe, I could bring that in. I read this puppet spider short story, and that's what I had optioned. And so I already had that in development. And it worked perfectly in this universe. Wow. It really makes it kind of exciting. And then you have to make sure that you have the rules of your universe figured out. And I love mythology. It's everything I love. It opens the possibility. So it didn't stifle me. It opened the possibility, because I knew as a filmmaker, I wasn't going to be able to get my standalone projects made. This gives me a chance to get them made. It's still a standalone project in the sense that the person that watches the Sasquatch movie doesn't have to go watch Spider Sisters, but they probably will, because if they intersect it all, so now I get two for the price of one, So anyway, all this to say, it's exciting, but you're right. You still have to just write. I was already passionate about that. Mm-hmm. So thank God I was able to do something more with it, but really it's about the passion itself. It was already there. So start with your passion. Don't be discouraged by it. Let it inspire you if it can. And if it can't, then God will show something. I just know it. I just know he will, because he knows what the trends are. He's not worried about these trends.
I love it. I love it. Well, this has been super. I can't believe the time went so quickly on that. So it's like we're going to need to franchise this to a
right
at some point. And I think the lessons a lot were the passion and the story and the character, the arena. You got us excited about that. And I just think the lesson to have us to remember is the name of the book you shared with us, that I think we're all going to need a bigger story. What better way to live on that?
That's right.
That's right. Great. And stuff. Real quick, while the recording's still going, next week, and see if I'm saying this right, Melissa, Bethany's coming next week. We have Bethany Jett coming, which we always like. We're going to be very practical next week, guys. We're going to talk about book proposals. I think that's what I read. Is that what the latest thing you've heard? Book proposals? And Bethany, of course, she'll be as enthusiastic as what we had today, I'm sure, about book proposals. So we'll learn some tips that way. But again, thank you. Thank you. Any concluding thing, Johnny, Melissa, Brandy, before we finish the recording?
I was just going to ask Zena really quick to tell us some of the services that you offer to authors, if you'd like to. I know you do like story consulting and those kinds of things. If there's anything you want to throw out there.
Absolutely. In fact, thank you for that. That's so nice. I was just going to say, I've really gotten good at this, helping people actually develop a universe for their, and finding ways to connect stuff that they're already working on. So if that's something that you want to do, I do have a consultation service like that. And just send me an email, Zena@thestorytellersmission.com, and I can talk to you more about that. But I would love to sit down and brainstorm with you and help you come up with a story universe where you can tie all your stuff together, and we'll brainstorm it. It'll be fun. I love it. So
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
thank you guys. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. And we'll finish up the recording. We'll see you guys. Thank you for staying and watching this. I know several people couldn't stay the whole time. They're going to watch the replay. We'll get that up a little bit later, and we'll invite everybody to come on back. We'll have probably a shorter, but we will have an after party here in just a minute for those of you that are here live with us. We'll see you next week for book proposals with Bethany. Thanks, everybody. Bye now.
Thank you.